Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm here with Connie Steele. Connie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Connie, you have 20 years, I believe, of experience working in Fortune 500 companies, startups. You now run your own consulting business and have expertise in quite wide-ranging areas, marketing strategy, product development. How do you kind of take everything that you currently do, and I know your husband's involved in the business as well, like just what's the quote-unquote elevator pitch? How do you describe to people when you meet someone at an event and they say, hey, what do you do? How do you respond?
So what I say is that we're a business strategy, marketing, and operations consultancy that supports scale-up businesses and helping them get to the next level. And to do so, it's about bridging the gap between strategy and execution and delivering immediate time to value.
Nice. Love it. You've clearly worked on that and it sounds good. So now let's go a little bit further back because your education, you have a Bachelor of, I believe, Science in Mathematics and Statistics and a Master's in Applied Statistics.
Yeah, I do. I have a quant background.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, crazy. So now you're in marketing and business strategy. Like, how do you go from math to marketing and strategy? Do you find you kind of leverage your education in your work right now? Or are these kind of skills of math and statistics just something that you did and you no longer really use?
You know what? I actually use that quantitative thinking and that problem solving all the time. And I didn't even realize how valuable it would be and what I do today. So I've always been interested in terms of what triggers people to buy, not just from the creative standpoint, but from a quantitative perspective. And so when I started marketing research, because I took that math background into applied statistics, which then led me into marketing research because I wanted to understand sort of the human aspect behind the numbers. And in that experience working at General Mills, where I started my career, I learned how to get that 360-degree view of the consumer, being able to tap into their needs, frustrations, attitudes, motivations. And I got to see early on how the strategic insights manifested itself into various activities that ultimately brought a product and the marketing efforts to market and how they all got supported. And all of that thinking, process, data collection is very much what you have to do when you build a business strategy too. So I didn't realize it at the time, but those were skills that I was able to leverage into absolutely what I do today.
So you've been running your consulting firm now, Flywheel Associates, for the last 7 years or so. And I'm thinking about what you just mentioned right now, and we see this a lot with the consultants that reach out to us and end up coming into our coaching program, where they come from a corporate background and they've used all these different kind of frameworks and ideas and 360-degree kind of assessments and all these tools, but now they come into building their own business and they're tasked with, okay, how do I actually go about getting my first clients and how do I actually build this business? Because no longer is the company or the brand the product. Now I am the product. So how did you approach that when you first launched the business? Like, how did you actually go about getting your first few clients?
Well, the way we did it was really through our network. We have a very strong network, thankfully, but it's the relationships that we built. I know that's one of the things that you've talked about a lot in your own podcast and in your book and the content that you write, that it's about building those relationships that deliver value. And so when I decided to go out and do this, it was about reaching out to that network, talking to them about what their needs were. Well, really just even catching up with them and understanding where they were in their business and communicating thoughts and ideas on how they could maybe approach a problem differently. Not selling anything, but just providing my point of view. And based on that really put me top of mind. And then so somebody I had worked with prior reached out to me and said, hey, you know what? I think you'd be perfect for this current engagement that I have. I need your sort of skill set because you have multiple areas that you could tackle. And so that's really where it all started.
So how long was it from the time that you left the corporate world into consulting, like when you decided, okay, start your consulting business to landing your first client? How long did it take of that kind of relationship building process and leveraging your network to get your first piece of business?
It's 3 months. Interestingly enough, I think it would have been sooner. It might have been right after, but there were specific decision criteria that I had put in place that made me realize, while I could start consulting immediately, it wasn't the right fit for, different reasons. I had specific parameters as to why I went to consulting in the first place. So I wanted to make sure that was a fit.
What were those things? Because it sounds like maybe there's some life decisions or where you want to place your priority. Just tell us a little bit like what was going into your decision-making criteria about what kind of client you wanted.
Well, one of the things that made me do the career pivot, I should say, was being able to achieve a bit more flexibility and control in the things that I wanted to do and focus on places where I could really deliver that impact. But coupled with that was being able to achieve greater flexibility and control in my personal life as well. At the time, my children were young and I had a pretty crazy job as the head of marketing where I had to commute 2 hours a day and I was working 70, 90 hours a week. And, I really needed to take that into consideration. So, the location of the company was going to be important. And I wasn't going to drive an hour and a half in one direction to go work at a potential client if I was already driving an hour or 2 hours, already for a full-time job.
I want to dig in as well to like 7 years into the business now, what kind of marketing is working best for you? But before we do that, if you're listening going, yeah, I'm beyond that early stage, but I want to serve, both kind of groups here that might be listening. And so you mentioned that you really worked on leveraging your network and the relationships and adding value. So very kind of tangibly, like what did you do? Did you just send emails to people and say, hey, I'd love to have a coffee with you, and then start just kind of asking what they're up to? Or were you sending out newsletters, or just kind of take us back to those early days? What do you think was actually working best for you to get that top of mind awareness and then ultimately have conversations and generate your first few clients?
It was the former. So it was sending emails to people that I had worked with in the past or who were, had been friends and colleagues of mine, and catching up and getting coffee and just having those discussions. And I will say that early on, I didn't think I was a networker. I wasn't a networker. I think when you work in the corporate world, you are very focused on what you need to accomplish that day, that week, that month, that year. That is your sphere of influence. So you're not really thinking about creating new connections and adding value to others because your job is to accomplish, what you're tasked to do in your corporate job. So when you leave that, it's very different where you have to shift and build out a broader network of people who are aware of your capabilities or realize that you could support them in a different way. So much of that was getting out of my own comfort zone, candidly, and then reaching out to folks and just reconnecting, authentically reconnecting and sharing with them a bit of my story as to why I decided to make that pivot, where I was looking to support people, where I felt I could best help them. And from there, that just created that awareness that I could be available and support them in a different way. And then that led to consulting engagements. And then from those engagements, that broadened my network, which then kind of created a referral pool.
Yeah, it's interesting how that kind of network effect takes place, right? It's sometimes people look at it and they feel, yeah, it's a bit of a mountain that's going to be hard to climb just to get started. But once you get started and, things, then it connects to someone else and connects to someone else and opens up a new door. And it's all about just that action at the beginning. So let's look at what you're doing right now. 7 years in, you've worked with many clients. What is your go-to in terms of marketing? What is working for you best right now if you have to hit on one thing in terms of new leads and kind of filling the pipeline? It
seems so old-fashioned, but it really is about referrals and network on a very personal and authentic basis.
So what does that mean? Tell us like kind of specifically, what are you doing to make that happen right now?
Much of that, it is looking at, your current, so if you've got your LinkedIn list, and you're going through those people where, you've had a relationship and maybe you haven't touched them for a while. It's reactivating and re-engaging some of those people that you might not have connected with recently and sending them a message and saying, well, how are you doing? Not that I want something from you, because I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, things are very transactional versus relational, which is something I know you talk about a lot. But you genuinely want to connect with a person because you're curious as to how they're doing. So you start off by just sending that quick message, whether it's a text message, whether it's an email, whether it's a LinkedIn message. It's just, truly seeing how they're doing and connecting with them there. And then based on that, you'll be surprised as how many people actually come back and say, hey, I'm great. I haven't talked to you in a long time. What are you up to? And then you have that next follow-up conversation just to kind of get caught up. And then based on that, what you're listening for is where could they be struggling and how can you help? Not what I'm going to sell you, but how can you just provide really insightful recommendations? Or if anything, you should connect them to people that could help them. You might not be that person that has any resources or insights, or you might not be the one that has the necessary information to support them right there and then. But if there's somebody else within your network that could be of value, absolutely help them that way, because then you're seen as the connector. I think that's another thing that's really important, is that you have to be the one to really look at yourself as a person that can connect others in that way that can provide a new expansive resource for a potential client. And when they see that, that shows how authentic you are in supporting them.
Right now, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges you've kind of maybe faced in the last 12 months within your business? Something that if you kind of, apply hindsight, you go, that was a real challenge, but I'm so glad that we fixed it or overcame it, or maybe you're even still working through it right now. But based on kind of where you've been at in the last 12 months, what stands out as a challenge that you've encountered? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
I think this is still a challenge for everyone, which is still finding leads and prospects. I will tell you, it's still an ongoing process. While, we are reaching out to people, we're reconnecting, you have the ebbs and flows. And sometimes, it all comes at once. And sometimes it is something in which there are quiet periods. I think the one thing that I've learned is that it has to be an ongoing process, because we have a very small team. And when we are doing the work, we are not always doing the necessary re-engagement, business development, whatever you want to call it, with potential prospects. Because the way that we work, we like to be so embedded.
So really what you're saying, Connie, is you get so busy kind of delivering for clients that your marketing then takes a bit of a backseat.
Yeah.
Right. Which is very common. Like, we hear this from clients all the time, right? So what have you done, or what have you found is maybe one thing that you put in place to help with that, to try and balance it out?
We've just started to really operationalize the reach outs and making it a very specific task that we do on a weekly basis, which is something that you hear a lot of. But when you get knee deep into work, it's something that can go by the wayside, because I think everybody kind of thinks of all the task-oriented things you need to do. When you actually take a step back and you think about your own strategic plan, what are the goals and objectives that you need to do? When we kind of reset things and looked at it that way, we're like, all right, this is something that always has to be done. It's a habit. We have to create the habit. And the only way we create the habit is making that a initiative that we do all the time, every week, so that we can continue the pipeline.
Looking at your website, you offer many different types of services, from marketing to financial and operational leadership. Some people might look at that and go, isn't that a bit of a kind of a generalist approach? And how are you able to market those different types of services effectively? So for all of you, like, how have you kind of thought about that, or how do you think about that from a marketing and a positioning perspective when you have kind of quite different services that are listed on the website?
So for us, it's not about the services. Being a marketer myself and having done a lot of brand strategy work for others, what you also realize over time is that it's not always about the product, because other people could also offer the same thing, and they're going to say they do it better. It's about how you deliver it. So for us, when we talk about bridging the gap between strategy and execution, that is that positioning. It is all about being embedded in your organization, really understand your business very well and connecting the dots, because we've worked as, an operator in these businesses. We know what it's like being on the client side. We've worked in various roles, but what's important is that we understand how they all thread together. So we're able to think and do dynamically. And so because we've been on that side and because we know how to think and do, that's where we add value. We can understand quickly what those gaps are, but we can come with solutions that are relevant. We know what it takes to actually create the right momentum in your organization because we've been there.
You run a podcast called the Strategic Momentum Podcast, and it's a pretty, well choreographed, kind of serious endeavor for you. It looks like, you're very focused on it, and I've had the honor and pleasure of being on it, and it was a really great experience. What made you decide to start the podcast, and how is that kind of playing into your overall business strategy right now?
So what got me into doing the podcast was all about delivering valuable content. And I wanted to tie to our positioning, which was how do you break through the common inertia that people face? And how can you help somebody understand maybe the strategic vision that they have, but how do you operationalize that? So that's really where it first started. And I thought, well, I don't want to just write blogs about my point of view. What I want to do is actually get the perspectives of progressive thought leaders. How have they personally attacked a problem in a different way? How do they reframe, a common issue that many people have? Because I think what various folks struggle with, it's not the what. Everybody, honestly, at this point knows what the problem is. What gets them stuck is the how. So that was really the focus of being able to tell really interesting tips, stories, and advice on how. So that's really, that idea is where it started. And then we've been able to, as I said, you've been a great guest on it, interview really interesting people from various backgrounds to provide that how. And that what that has done is provided valuable content that has helped create really this top of mind, has created top of mind awareness for us. We certainly get a lot of organic traffic coming to our site of people learning about, the way that we think, but really interesting advice from guests. But the other piece is that our goal was to also be positioned as a thought leader. And so we use this as a way to create that thought leadership content.
Is there one principle or idea that you've discovered or maybe even just followed over the last little while that is something that you keep coming back to over and over? Like in our case, we really try and apply the concept of 80-20 in a lot of what we do, based on the work of Richard Koch and Perry Marshall. That plays into like a lot of the thinking that we have in terms of our marketing efforts and where we spend time, both in the business and outside of the business. Is there something like that for you that is like you keep coming back to, or you use to filter and make decisions and distinctions within your business or even outside of your business?
So let me put it in this way, how we think about our business or how we think about how to help the clients as well. This whole notion of agility. How do we think about supporting clients in a way where we can deliver the most value in the shortest amount of time and get embedded so quickly that they could see kind of the fruits of labor, could see true impact. And we apply that same principle also to our own business too, because if we spend so much time thinking and not doing anything and not trying, then we're not going to sort of move forward in the way that we need to. So a lot of it is again, what is the goal and objective that we have? How do we break it down into much more digestible, tangible parts that can show action and traction and results? And that's really kind of the lens that we look at the way we operate our business, but also the lens that we support our clients.
Yeah, I think that's it's important for people to have some kind of driving force or, several different ways that you filter through and make those decisions or distinctions or live your life by, or ask yourself some really good questions, right? As you're kind of running up against different challenges each day. So that's a great one. Right now, when you look at where you're kind of at in the business and what you've accomplished, what are you excited about going into 2020? I guess when this episode airs, it'll already be 2020. But what are you excited about for this coming year and to accomplish over the next 12 months?
I think what continually excites me is the opportunity to help create growth and impact for new businesses in different industries. I mean, every year has been a really interesting challenge and exposure to new areas that we didn't even know about. So from a business opportunity perspective, there are various clients that we have in the pipeline of which we haven't had as much experience in, but it's certainly exciting to be able to learn a whole new industry because every time we've been in new spaces, we see where they all connect to others. And because of this broad experience that we have, we're able to leverage that insight and create that really tangible value pretty quickly. The other thing is that we're obviously excited from a podcast perspective of really interesting guests that we have that will be coming on that provide a different lens into how to think about, mentorship, how to think about career pivoting, and really other topics that we believe that will be pretty helpful for others.
I think a lot of consultants face that question, or at least they're internally, playing with it in their mind around how do you respond to a client or an organization where you haven't necessarily worked in their specific industry before, or you haven't, there's something that's new there. A lot of people are concerned about that in terms of that might be a negative for them, but it sounds like for you, you're actually excited about that. That could be a positive. So when someone says, well, Connie, you and Flywheel, have you worked in our industry before? And the answer is no. How do you respond to that?
Well, what's interesting is because we have worked in a lot of different capacities, inevitably, we've probably touched it in some way. But in the past, I think a lot of it is the approach. When we walk through our specific approach to understanding their business, it's no different than us taking that to another organization where we've had a lot of experience in there. It is being able to methodically walk through our how. So it isn't this sort of black magic that they think they could be getting. I think a lot of times when you work with clients who may not have a familiarity, for example, with brand, because that seems quite fuzzy to them, like, well, what do you do? Is it just all creative? Is it all just like, oh, you come up with this interesting tagline and then that's what you do? I'm like, no, it's actually a very strategic and analytical process. Let me detail the approach that we take to really understand your business and how that leads into developing the right recommendations and subsequently actions to bring it to life in your organization. So a lot of this, once you create the necessary transparency into the way that you work, it builds a level of trust and confidence. And honestly, it minimizes risk. Because at the end of the day, what they're concerned about is taking a chance on you. And how do they know that what you're going to do is going to be of value and impact that they expect?
So if people want to learn more, Connie, about your work and your company and everything else that you have going on, where's the best place for them to go?
You can go to flywheelassociates.com, or you can also go to strategicmomentum.co, which is the podcast site, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Good stuff. We're going to have all that linked up in the show notes. Connie, thanks again so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.